Two and a Highchair for Smoking. Chapter 3. Back on the Rail. Part 9. Ella had a younger sister. That whiny little bitch. She hangs out with those losers that just smoke weed all the time. One night, her sister brought the losers over when her parents were out. Ella was pissed. I didn't understand. They were upstairs. We were in the basement. Why care? The sister and her friends were still in high school. They liked shitty music, but seemed like regular kids. "They've been smoking weed," said Ella when we heard them come in through the basement door. She followed them upstairs. "I can smell you. I can smell all of you. You're stinking up the house." I remained in the kitchen for a minute after Ella left. The sister and her friends, 2 guys and 2 girls, sat at the table eating potato chips and convenience store nachos covered with cheese sauce. "You guys know how to play spoons? It's fun when you're baked." They looked at me with eyes the color of ripe strawberries. I explained the rules. Start with a spoon in the middle of the table for each player, except one. Deal 5 cards to each player. Try to get 4 of a kind, picking up and passing cards from player to player as quickly as you can. When you get 4 of a kind, discreetly pluck 1 spoon from the center of the table. If you're not the first, grab a spoon when you notice one is missing. The slowest player, the one who ends up with nothing, is the loser. There's usually a mad scramble for the final spoon. Perfect stoner game. Ella was angry when I went downstairs. "Why are you encouraging them?" "They're not hurting anyone. Let them have some fun. They're not smoking crack." "You should have heard yourself. They're probably laughing at you right now." We heard the steady murmur and giggle of stoned conversation upstairs. Then it stopped, and we heard the cutlery drawer open. Several items were removed. I smiled at Ella, vindicated. We sat on opposite ends of her bed in awkward silence. Upstairs, screams and laughter rang out every time a game of spoons came to an end. She'd been like this for a while. It wasn't the spoons. It was the shoes. Selling a product that began to disintegrate while customers could still return it had a way of hacking away at the profit margin. The store was going broke. There had to be cuts. Ella had accepted too many returns, and her boss wanted someone to blame. She got shit-canned just before Valentine's Day, and her mood soured immediately. Or was Ella just downbeat to begin with? The more time I spent with her, the clearer it became that she wasn't a very happy girl. She was jaded about men, too, an attitude shaped by bad experiences with previous boyfriends. I was the last hope, she told me one night under the electric blanket. In the beginning, I had looked forward to seeing her every day. She would come up the stairs to the restaurant and wait for me to get off work. My stomach would jump when I saw her. But things had changed. It was a struggle to be cheerful when we were together. She hated smoking, so I tried to quit. When that didn't work out, she frowned, shrugged her shoulders, and muttered, "Well, I guess I shouldn't have expected so much." Unemployed and with nothing to do during the day, she was depressed and lethargic all the time. The only thing I wanted was sex, and I felt a little guilty about that. I was proving her right. Men sucked. I was selfish. But what else was there? I wanted it. But she had turned off the tap until further notice. Part 10. "Kimberly?" I heard a woman's voice. It broke through the ambient sounds of muttering and shuffling down in the food court. It held equal measures of surprise and worry. "Kimberly?" There it was again. A few eaters in the restaurant looked over the rail. What was happening down there? Kimberly! The cry was full of worry now. At that moment, everyone understood what had happened. A mother had just lost her child. Her voice was agonizing to listen to. People in the food court looked up from the processed slop in front of them. No one knew what to do. Kimberly! Each time she called out the name, I could hear more desperation creeping into her voice. It became shrill, and the sense of panic clear. The unthinkable had happened. From one corner of the mall, I could see Todd and Tubby, the two security guards, running toward the food court, walkie-talkies drawn. The mother was beside herself with panic. She wanted to run everywhere at once, but knew if she ran one way, her daughter might be wandering even further away in another direction. Were there any perverts in the mall? Seconds were passing. Time was being lost. People sitting along the rail muttered and whispered amongst themselves in tones of concern. A sense of alarm rippled through the food court. People looked around. Some stood up. Again, higher pitched and louder this time. Kimberly! Her voice carried. There was no pretending this was not an emergency. No polite, controlled tone anymore. Just anguished pleading and a growing horror at the certainty that no answer would come. I couldn't see the tears on the mother's face. She was too far away. But I could hear them in her voice. There was no hiding it. Todd and Tubby were talking to her now. What did the girl look like? How old was she? What was she wearing? The mother could barely speak. Her voice was choked with worry and fear. People looked around. Was there a small child alone? And then there was a commotion near the corner, where a long hall led to the public bathrooms. A woman had a young girl with her, who was crying. Kimberly! The emotion in the mother's voice was tangible. It came out in one sudden gush. She rushed across the food court and embraced her daughter. The woman's friend, who had been unnoticed till now, joined her. The episode was over. People put their noses back to the trough, and the volume of chatter subsided. Every table along the rail in the restaurant, as well as those upstairs, had been transfixed by the drama unfolding in the food court. So had I. Sylvia, the full-time dishwasher, who was a little slow, emerged from the dish pit to get a bus tub. She had missed the whole thing. Part 11. Ella's friend Holly came up the stairs to the restaurant. She gave me a look. Not judgmental. Just sad and disappointed. I knew what she was going to say before she said it. You can't break up with Ella like that. You just can't. She's not perfect, but she deserves better. Holly was right, of course. I had been an asshole. A few days before, I had gone over to Ella's house to break up. It was time. I was going to do it. I was ready. Then some of her friends showed up unannounced, and it spoiled the mood. I had to put the plan on the shelf. I called her the next day, but she was out, and the phone went to her answering machine. It's me. Leave a message. I'll call you back. Ella could be very laconic. I opened my mouth, and a jumble of syllables tumbled out. Things aren't working out, Elle. I don't know if it's you or me, but things aren't getting any better. I'm really not good at this. I don't know what to say. I think we should break up. I hung up. Shit. Had I just broken up with my girlfriend on her answering machine? It would have been cowardly enough if I had called it quits over the phone, but here I was breaking up via recorded message. She wouldn't even find out that she was single, until she checked her messages. What had I done? I felt worse than ever. The message was just sitting there, waiting to be checked. I suddenly remembered why Ella wasn't home. She was at her grandmother's house. Did you know that? Not at the moment. She started crying, Steve, in front of her grandmother. She kept asking her what was wrong. Ella couldn't even answer. She was crying so hard. And then she got it out, and her grandmother said, "What kind of boy breaks up with a girl like that?" Holly's eyes narrowed. There was that look again. Disappointment. I thought you were better than that. I wanted to say that I wasn't a bad guy. Dating Ella had been hell. She was perpetually moody, full of self-pity. I had done everything to make her feel better. In the end, I just wanted out. But that didn't change the equation. Answering machine plus breakup message equals asshole. No getting around that. In my mind, I tried to justify it. The week before, we'd gone downtown. She found a dress in a vintage store that she really liked. While she was looking around for something else, I sneaked over to the cash register, bought it, and secretly put it in her bag. When we left the store, I told her to take a look. "That was so nice." She smiled and gave me a big hug. "I love it." I just paid $30 for that hug, I thought. 5 minutes later, she was back to her regular dreary self. No more, I thought. We're done. But we weren't. After Holly's visit, we got back together one last time. It was a disaster. She didn't trust me not to break up with her again. And I didn't want to see her again. At all. Breaking up for the second time was awkward and depressing. But at least the weather was nice that day in the park. Spring, I thought afterward, was a good time to break up with someone. The melancholy of winter was past. Birds were in the trees, flowers were blooming, and the sun was in the sky. A time of new beginnings. Things smelled nice. But inside, I felt at a loose end. Part 12. I stood behind the cash register, the eye of the storm. Every table in the restaurant was full. The waiting area was packed. What was it about Mother's Day that brought in so many people? It was Slam City. Father's Day was never like this. The opposite, in fact. Dads contented themselves with socks and neckties on their special day. Moms got a meal at the mall. The boss's wife came up to the till, and I showed her the waiting list. The notepad, with the restaurant logo in the corner, was down to its final page and filled with scribbled names. Sheehan, 2 for non. Price, 2 for smoking. Kelly, 1 for non-smoking. Seymour, 3 in a Highchair, non-smoking, on the rail. There were more. Many more. Anyone leaving? I asked. Table 27 in the back, maybe. 15 just got their bill. What about the gazebo? I was just there. 16 has their bill, but 17 is still eating. Seymour wants to sit along the rail. I pointed at the name. Table 12 has their bill? Amy's making a dessert in the pass bar. I think it's for them. Really? Shit. Table 12 was holding up the whole show. Assholes. Kelly said he'll sit anywhere. Table 9 has their bill. We're just waiting for them to go. Let's put Seymour there when 9 leaves. A young man and an older woman, probably his mother, came to the front. The man gave me the bill, table 41. The boss's wife scurried off to clean and set it. Another man and woman came up the stairs, but this was not a son with his mother. He was graying. She was young, pretty, and new. It was Mr. Casual Wear again, with his most recent part-timer. They held hands. I looked at her. A bit early for Father's Day, aren't you? The words were right on my tongue. Nah, better not. 2 for none? Smoking, thanks, said Mr. Casual Wear, nodding toward the girl. He smiled. Ah, she was a smoker. It'll be at least 30 minutes, I said, gesturing toward the notepad. That's fine, he said, squeezing the girl's hand. Who was holding down the fort back at the store? Someone who wasn't banging the boss, evidently. Those long lunch breaks didn't come for free. Table 41 is set, said the boss's wife, appearing beside me. Kelly for one? I called out. He folded his newspaper, smiled, and stood up. The boss's wife picked up a menu and led him upstairs. As they left, several more tables, all middle-aged women with grown children, began ascending the stairs. They traveled in flocks. Mother's Day. The rush started early, finished late. Everyone and their dog wanted to take their mom out for breakfast, or brunch, or lunch, or a late lunch, an early dinner. Dinner just before closing time. Are you still open? We're closing in 5 minutes. Great! 2 for non-smoking, please. You had to love those people. Part 13. I was cleaning a table when I saw him come up the stairs. I figured he was looking for work. He looked the type. Faded jean jacket, long hair, looked hard done by. I picked up 4 coffee cups with one hand and 2 half-finished glasses of water with the other. Fingers, ladies and gentlemen. It's all about the fingers. I carried them to the front pass bar and put them in one of the bus tubs. I looked at the washcloth bucket. It was a murky brown. Now the lunch rush was over, it was a good time to change the water. I rinsed out the white bucket, wiped away the grungy residue with a paper towel, and went back to the dish pit to fill it with a mixture of hot water and cleaning formula. When I came back, the guy with long hair was now sitting at the spare table near the front, filling out an application form. From a distance, he looked Asian. I wiped the table clean, clearing the coffee stains, spilled gravy, and scattered grains of salt. The buckets usually had 2 or 3 cloths each. At first they were hot, topped with a layer of chemical bubbles that could be trusted to kill 99% of germs. During a lunch rush, we would wring out a cloth, wipe a table, and then toss it back in the bucket. It didn't take long for the water to cool, the bubbles to disappear, and the color to change from a soapy white to a raw sewage brown. It was disgusting to look at, unspeakable to contemplate. On occasion, I would wring out a cloth from the bucket and reflect that I was probably making the table dirtier with every wipe. But it was too busy to make the trip to the dish pit and change the cleaning fluid. I set the table and looked up. The guy had filled out the application form and was waiting at the front. I got it, I said to Lori, and walked up to the cash register. Thanks. I'll make sure the manager sees this. It was an automatic thing to say. I didn't even think about it. The guy gave me an odd look, then turned and began walking down the stairs. I glanced at the application form. He had worked at a few different places, including another location of the franchise back in 1991. So had I. What the hell? My eyes darted to the top of the form. Name of applicant, Cecil Smith. Cecil? I hadn't seen him in 5 years. I had so completely erased him from my memory, I hadn't even recognized him. In an instant, it all made sense. I had been mistaken. He wasn't Asian. He was native. Cecil had been adopted by a white family as a child. Now I understood the look that he had given me. I came out from behind the counter. He had just reached the bottom of the stairs and turned the corner. We had had a falling out over money in the end. I had lent him the cash for his first month's rent in a trailer park after he got evicted from the halfway house. He was wrestling with problems, personal issues I didn't know about or understand. Cecil told me one day that he was going to pay me back after he got back on his feet. Then he skipped town. I had completely written him off. So many years ago. So many things to say. So many questions. I stared at the application in my hands for a minute, then tore it up and threw in the garbage. We weren't hiring. Part 14. On Sundays, we opened before the mall. It was usually a quiet hour. The stores were closed, their signs off, and their interiors dark. Above the food court, however, we were open for business. Not a bad way to start a shift. A few tables here and there, some time to clean. Other times, though, we got hit by an early rush. "Steven, I'm going to need you to run drinks to my tables. I'm slammed." On mornings like that, I wondered what the hell was wrong with these people. Why would they come all the way to the mall when the place wasn't even open for another hour? Wasn't Sunday supposed to be a day of rest? Whether it was early, whether it was a busy morning or a slow one, early customers were a mixed bag. A few were store managers getting some breakfast before a day's work. Others were clearly shoppers, loading up on calories before scouring the mall for the best deal on steak knives and children's underwear or something else. These people clearly needed something. There was one regular group that I could never figure out. They came in every Sunday morning, glassy-eyed and hungover. 4 hairy-chested men that wore blue jeans and lumberjack shirts. Saturday nights at the local country music cabaret was their thing. What got them out of bed so early on a Sunday morning? It was a mystery. By lunch, church families started to pour in, all dressed in their Sunday best. One after another, they climbed the stairs, perused the bookshelf for the latest in religious fiction, and put their names on the list. Whatever else could be said about them, these church people certainly knew how to breed. "Table of 8, please. Non-smoking. We'll need 2 high chairs." Finding the right tables to fit into the right space was like playing Tetris. On blessed Sundays, when the good Lord himself looked down on our restaurant, the necessary tables were free and set. Squeeze them together, and we were good to go. On less fortunate Sundays, we invariably needed a 2-seater to complete the seating for a big family or a group of friends. And god damn if those 2 assholes at the table didn't always seem to know it. The whole restaurant was full, except for a large table next to them. Sometimes I could swear that I had seen one of those pricks glance at the empty table, smirk, and then ask the server for a fresh cup of coffee. or a fresh pot. They'd stay there for ages. But what could we do? After the server had dropped off the bill and asked them if they needed anything else, the waiting game would begin. We weren't allowed to tell them that we needed their table. The customer was always right. And in this case, they were right there. And they stayed right there. Part 15. We rarely had rats in the restaurant, but here they were, 6 or 7 of them, skittering around the waiting area. Just so you know, there's a $2.50 minimum per person, I said. That usually put them off. The mall rats lived on coffee and rarely had more than $1 each. This time, they seemed prepared. We're gonna order food. Smoking or non? Smoking. Of course. I took them along the rail to the very back of smoking, where there was space to put 2 tables together. Would you like to start off with something to drink? Coffee. And you? I think we'll all have coffee to start. This one seemed to be the leader. He wore a black trench coat, which contrasted with the deathly pallor of his skin. He was an indoor rat, the oldest by several years. What's a guy that old doing hanging out in the mall with a bunch of goth high school kids, I wondered. Looking at one of the girls, who looked like she was still in middle school, I didn't want to know. Fran looked ready to shit when I told her. I am not going to serve them, she said flatly. Those mall rats will stay there through the dinner rush and take up those tables the whole time. They said they'd order food, I said. But even I didn't really believe that. They would hum and haw, drink pot after pot of coffee, and then pay the minimum charge instead of ordering even a cheese bread or fries. And rats didn't tip. It wasn't in their nature. Meanwhile, people ready to order full dinners and leave generous tips would have to wait. Maybe leave. And at the end of the night, Fran would have made crap tips. I was off shift by then, so I shrugged my shoulders. Anyway, 6 coffees for table 24. Fran's usual good humor was gone. She was pissed. I went to the staff room and had a coffee and a smoke. I guess in my own way, I was a mall rat too. We all were. About 20 minutes later, I was getting ready to leave when I heard Fran's voice, loud and angry. Not in my section drinking coffee. Now get out! Fran had ignored the table, hadn't brought them coffee, and was now telling them to get out. The rats were angry. As they left, one of the girls, the youngest, spoke up. My dad is in mall management. You're in shit, lady. Fran still looked angry, but she stopped. A look of worry crossed her face. Fran, said the girl, reading her name tag. Her smile was young and full of spite. Have a nice day. It was then that I saw the boss standing by the cutlery counter. How long had he been there? He looked pissed. The argument was short. Fran had been written up twice before for complaints. This was the last straw, he said. Instead of apologizing, promising, or pleading, Fran lost her shit. I remembered the cook walking off the job so long ago. Here we were again. To hell with you! To hell with this job! She wasn't crying, not yet. But when she left, with her jacket under one arm and purse on her shoulder, she was a hurricane of emotion. and then Fran was gone. She had left the building. Part 16. Hey man, long time no see. 2 for non-smoking? I knew Shane and his girlfriend from high school. More than acquaintances, but not quite friends. We made small talk, and I brought them their drinks. When they paid, Shane invited me to his birthday party the following week. He lived in a townhouse complex close to the mall. I said sure. I found the place without much problem. The party felt a bit like a high school reunion. I talked with some of his friends, a couple of whom I remembered. One of Shane's roommates seemed to be on the outs with him. Later in the night, I found out that he was moving out. Before the end of the night, Shane told me that he was looking for a new roommate. Rent was $350 a month, plus bills. I thought about it. Living on my own? Shit, why not? It was a no-brainer. It was close to work. I made good money. I could eat at work most of the time. I could afford it. It was time. Sean helped me move. I didn't have much stuff. We packed my things into some garbage bags and loaded them into his 1973 Volkswagen van. We laughed and giggled, darting back and forth between my bedroom and the van, as if we were burglarizing the house. Part 17. Richard Price was a regular, and a cunt. A regular cunt, you might say. When he came in, I would nod in recognition and say, "Smoking, for one?" "Yeah, fast if you can." He hated waiting, and he always seemed to be in a hurry. But after he got a seat, he would sit for ages after he finished eating, smoking and badgering the servers for fresh pots of coffee. He could be an arrogant prick, which led the floor staff to wonder what sort of high roller he was. And then one day, Amy overheard him talking to someone about work. The result astounded all of us. He drives a truck for Pepsi. That's it? Yeah, I know, right? We all thought he must be some big shot. We always assumed that most of our customers had jobs with more prestige than ours did, or were at least better paying. It was a pleasant surprise to find out this dick was lucky if he made more money than a server with a good section. The mall attracted all types. Some were clearly down at heels, others apparently well off, but you never really knew. There was one regular, an old guy, who came in with his wife on weekends. The first time he paid with his gold credit card, someone noticed that his signature was a single line. No name, not even a few scribbled letters, just a single stroke of the pen. The boss's wife didn't think it was a legitimate signature at first. "I use that signature all the time as a bank manager," he told her. "A lot of money passed through my hands with that as authorization. It's fine." He had a gold visa, so who was to argue? Unlike Dick Price, he wasn't a prick. He was just making a point. I liked him. Just before I finally quit for good, he told me that he had a lot of money, but that he would give it all up to be in my shoes. To be your age again? Absolutely. Enjoy this time while you have it. Part 18. At first, living on my own was great. My 21st birthday was coming up, and I was free. I could smoke in my room, come and go as I pleased. I was my own man, independent for the first time. After a while, though, scum started to seep in. It started with suck, S-U-C-K, C.K. Shane belonged to a hip-hop group called Sexy Unknown Canadian Kids, and the members started hanging out at our place all the time. They helped themselves to the food, slept in the living room, used the shower, and paid no rent or bills. I would come home and find the bread, peanut butter, and honey all missing. Drinks from the fridge vanished too, especially powdered iced tea. Karen, one of the other roommates, complained that some of her CDs had gone missing. We all know who was to blame. One hot afternoon, I came home from the mall and found Kenny the K and Gut Rot, two of the more prolific members, taking a nap in the tent that they had pitched in the driveway. No one had a car, so the spot was usually empty. Two pairs of legs in skinny jeans protruded from the front flap of the tent. Paint fumes hung in the air. Despite the good weather and idyllic location near the river, the place quickly became depressing. I nicknamed it the welfare pad. It suited the place. It wasn't that everyone was on social assistance, but half the people sleeping in our unit certainly seemed to be. Karen turned out to be emotionally unstable. One morning, she tried to kill herself with pills. Kenny was snooping around her room, possibly looking to pilfer some more CDs, when he noticed her lying unconscious on the floor beside her bed. In a rare moment of coherent thought, he called 911. Kenny the K was the hero of the hour. Around that time, Suck was recording a new album. Shane, always willing to incorporate new ideas and styles, suggested we hook up the effects processor that I had bought off Nate to his 16-track. I said sure. I even recorded a few guitar tracks to add to the mix. The result was a sonic travesty. A year or two later, when the welfare pad was but a fading memory, I would find the album on sale at an indie record store downtown. It was called Revenge of the Turd Burglars. My appearance on the album was, thankfully, uncredited. Part 19. Stereotyping was wrong. I knew it. Everyone knew it. But we all did it. Maybe it was working with the general public for so long that made us create these simplified, fixed images. Everyone seemed to be an example of a type. The religious family in their Sunday best, coming in for lunch after church, for example, or the obese customer who would eat a ham and egg skillet and then ask for the dessert menu. And then there was my favorite, the old couple who came up the stairs on rickety legs, complaining about the lack of an elevator with each step. A walking stereotype, we would mutter as they came up the stairs. Some people just fit the bill. They had been born for it. Few fit preconceived notions, however, like Alex DuPont. "He's not gay," laughed one of the servers. "He's flaming." Alex didn't walk up the stairs. He ascended them, daintily infusing every step with a delicate flourish. He wore tight jeans. Very tight jeans. In cooler weather, he wore a bomber jacket, and if necessary, a leopard print scarf. He had a thick mustache and tousled hair. He wore thick glasses and spoke with a lisp. And he taught French. He had it all to a T. "Alex, for one, non-smoking," he said. But he didn't speak like most people. He just let the words come out as he sighed. He had a very French world weariness to him. He came in once with a woman, which shocked everyone. One of the servers asked him, "Is she your girlfriend?" They figured it was polite to ask. "That's not really my cup of tea," he sighed. "She's my sister." He was patient when he had to wait for a table and never complained. Everyone liked him. Part 20. It was a rainy Wednesday morning, just before 10:30. 2 words loomed above the building's entrance. East Mall. Few things on God's green earth were more depressing than the mall on a shitty day. I walked through the doors. The entrance to Zeller's, a poor man's Kmart, was inside to the right. I walked down the hall past the row of cafes until I reached the food court. And there, just down the stairs, was Roughage. It was a sandwich place. And there was the Roughage girl. She had been there forever. I couldn't remember anyone else ever working there. She was slightly boyish, always wore the same short-sleeved gray work shirt, and had brown hair tucked under a ball cap. As the years wore on, I felt almost a kinship with her. 2 long-termers. Would she ever escape them all? Would I? The stairs up to the restaurant were at the far end of the food court. I walked past all the greasy pizza and burger franchises. Just under the stairs were 2 Chinese food places. Greasy steam rose from the woks of hell. Sometimes the boss made me sweep or clean the stairs, which sent down a shower of dust. It pissed them off, but I pretended not to understand. Wednesday, 11 to 3. 4 hours of my life that I'd never get back. After the first shift, I had a 90-minute break. What to do with an hour and a half of freedom? Sometimes I read a book in the food court. Other times, I went to one of the cafes down the hall. Darlings. I didn't know who thought up that name, or why they thought it was a good idea. The lights in that cafe, like all the others, were overly bright and gave the walls an unpleasant stare, or an unpleasant glare. The coffee was subpar. I always had a headache by the time I left. Smoking was allowed, though. There was that. After the break, it was the evening shifts that really destroyed my faith in humanity. Especially Wednesday nights. As the posters and the table talkers made abundantly clear, Wednesday night was value night. Select meals were available at a discounted price to encourage families who might otherwise have thought that dinner out was too expensive. "It's not value night," said Norma cynically. "It's Welfare Wednesday. They never tip. The bastards." Servers considered a Wednesday evening shift as a punishment. Welfare may have been doled out on only one Wednesday a month, but a good portion of customers each value night did fit the type, squeezing themselves into every social assistance cliche imaginable. And some of these people certainly required squeezing. I could hear them before they even reached the stairs. Their kids were loud and misbehaved. Through no fault of their own, they had struck out in the ball game of life. They were fat, strike 1. Ugly, strike 2. And poor, strike 3. You're out of here. I swear I had seen the parents earlier that day at Zeller's. And now they were here. Did these people never go home? Were they trying to save money on utilities? I didn't know. All I knew was that value night drew them in, like flies, to dog shit. My watch said 7 o'clock. The dinner rush was dragging on. 3 tables were waiting, and I could see one more coming up the stairs. The mother and kids were coming up first. The dad, like a pack mule, came up behind, struggling with a stroller. I was cleaning one of the tables in the gazebo. In one hand, I held 3 dinner plates and 2 side plates. In the other, a few balled-up placemats. Dump the dishes in the front pass bar, wash my hands, then go to the front. That was the plan. Mentally listing the next several tasks, sequencing them, was second nature by that point. I had taken 3 steps, mentally projecting myself into the pass bar, when table 18 stopped me. The man was balding and wore a green golf shirt. "Are you the manager?" he asked, with a mouthful of food. "No," I said. "Well, anyway," said the man, "I'm not going to pay for this." He pointed at the plate. "This food is disgusting." He forked more liver and mashed potatoes into his mouth, never taking his eyes off me. I could hear him chewing. My eyes flicked to the front of the restaurant. The family had reached the top of the stairs and was waiting for someone to take down their name. The mother, holding a crying baby, looked ready to bite someone's head off. The father seemed to be deeply regretting certain life choices. Their 2 other spawn were pulling books off the shelf. For a moment, the universe stopped. I didn't know which choice was more undesirable. Dealing with the douche in front of me, scooping food into his mouth for which he would refuse to pay, or welcoming another unhappy family into the fold. I chose the latter. Part 21. Yup. Yup. Yelp. Somewhere nearby, a dog was getting beaten. I could hear it, even in my dream. Then it became impossible to sleep, and I found myself rising from the murky depths of unconsciousness. And then I was awake, in the dark, on the mattress, in my bedroom, at the welfare pad, in the welfare complex. And then I realized it wasn't a dog. Someone was having sex, really good sex, close by. But where? Not far away by the sound of it. I understood then why I had thought I was hearing an animal in pain. But this wasn't pain. The cries came in regular, rhythmic bursts. Some guy was banging that girl like a drum. What did she look like, I wondered. Was she hot? She sounded hot. Fully awake now, my night vision drew shapes in the darkness. The outline of the bookcase and the door. Above me was the window, open to let in a breeze. It let in more. This wasn't a film or pictures in a magazine. Real sex was close by, within earshot. The closest I had been to sex in months, and it was painful to listen to. What did the guy look like? Was he my age? Older? In shape? Or fat and ugly? And what did she look like? My imagination weighed a few possible types. Whether or not she was hot was beside the point, though. Some guy was getting laid across the street. I wasn't. All I could do was lie there in the dark and wish it were me. My mind wandered. Were they visiting from somewhere? I never heard this sort of thing in the complex. Did she realize the whole neighborhood could hear her? What positions were they doing? The cries continued at the same tempo, the same steady beat. How long had they been at it? What was it like for the people next door? They must hear even more than me. The sound of bed springs, the slap of skin on skin, even the breathing between the squeals, which at first I had thought sounded like a dog getting its tail stepped on. Would the neighbors complain, or were they too shy to interrupt? Was I the only one listening? Was she always like this? I wondered. Where did she work? Did her co-workers know how loud she was in the sack? More random late-night thoughts. Was this a one-night stand? It didn't sound like a married couple with kids, that was for sure. Were they using toys? Protection? Was a child being conceived? A disease transmitted? What was it like to be that guy at that moment? They were like two rutting animals. I couldn't sleep while this was going on. It was hopeless. It would have been fine if I was a part of the festivities. I'd be fine waking up tired in the morning if that were the case. But the reality was, I'd be grumpy and tired at work the next morning because someone else had had a great night. And then the sounds stopped. No rising crescendo at the end. No eruption of sound and fury in the last few seconds, with the man finally joining in, their voices intertwining. No. The yelps were simply there one moment, and then nothing. The pause drew out. That was that. Ella had never made noise like that. But she did like to bite and scratch. The morning after our first night together, I had taken off my shirt before getting in the shower. In the mirror, I saw my back and chest covered with scratches and bruises. It was like I had wrestled a wildcat. Lying there in the darkness, I felt the sharp pinch of loneliness. Part 22. Sometimes things happened. Occurrences that made an otherwise forgettable shift stand out in memory. A server would get sick at the last minute and call in, leaving us short-handed. Or a table would sneak out, leaving someone stuck with the bill. We didn't do anything. Things just happened to us. Other times, the way we did things left us open to disaster. For example, all the coffee pots were washed and put back on the tables with their lids perched on top at the end of each day. Despite the installation of cyanide-based pesticides, we were never quite free of cockroaches. One critter climbed inside a coffee pot one night. The next morning, a customer wound up pouring a dead cockroach into his cup. He walked out. That was on us. Other times, things simply went wrong. During a busy lunch, it could get quite noisy at the front. People would tell me their names, and sometimes I wrote them down wrong. That's not how you spell it. I'm sorry, sir. Could you tell me again? Sometimes with the noise, people's names sounded like something else. I wouldn't even attempt to write out what I thought I had heard. I just told you. I could swear to God he had told me his name was Jizz, but there was no way I was going to write that down without confirming it. Amy came up, looked at the list, called out a name, scooped up several menus, and led the eaters to a table along the rail. Did that start with a J? I asked. No, it's spelled Chisholm. Chisholm. That's it, Chisholm. It's not that hard. Moments like that, I had to keep the mask on. keep smiling. All in a day's work. I was just making sure I didn't call out, "Jizz, table of 5 for smoking? Jizz, your table's ready." But then things went wrong. A man stood up and came up to the till. "That table came in after us. Where are we on here?" The man had a mustache, which was never a good sign. He scanned the list. "Where are we?" "What was your name, sir?" Typically, people that waited the longest wanted a table along the rail, especially in smoking. Tables of 2, willing to sit anywhere, got seated fairly quickly. His face darkened. The mouth under the mustache grimaced in dismay. "You crossed us off the list!" He pointed to a name near the top of the notepad. Jerkoff, table of 3 and a highchair. For smoking. Oh, shit. Another group had been seated first by mistake. Maybe I had called out his name several times and he had not heard me. This sometimes happened, especially when there were large crowds. "I'm sorry, sir. We'll try to get you in right away," I said. "Please, someone leave right now," I prayed. "Please. I'll convert. I'll be reborn. Just let Jerkoff get his table and get out of here." "Every fucking time," he said, shaking his head. "Are you the manager?" No. I was always happy to answer that question. "I want to see him." There was menace in his voice. Laurie went to get the boss. In the meantime, a table came up to pay. "And how was everything today?" I asked, forcing a smile. It was an old couple, regulars. The woman had a gap between her teeth, which caused her to whistle whenever she spoke. It sometimes took great self-control not to laugh. Today was not one of those days. The boss came out of the kitchen and walked to the front. As soon as Jerkoff saw him, his face changed. It twisted into disgust, and he started yelling. "I should have fucking known! One of you people! Every fucking time!" The boss froze. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. Neither could I. Jerkoff's wife and her friend looked at each other for a second, and then swiftly picked up the stroller and began carrying it down the stairs. They didn't want any part of this. "Every time I come here, there's always a fuck-up!" Jerkoff turned to walk down the stairs. "Can't find a restaurant run by a fucking Canadian anymore." That did it. The boss ran after him, jumping 2 steps at a time. He grabbed the man by the arm and leaned in close. I waited for the punch I was sure was coming. None came. I saw the boss's jaw moving quickly, but couldn't make out what he was saying. And then it was over. The boss let go of Jerkoff's arm and came back up the stairs, his hands trembling. A table was set and ready to go. The boss called out the name of the next people on the list. I felt something, some emotion, toward the boss that I had never felt before. Jerkoff was an asshole, probably not the first that the boss had encountered. What was it like to encounter something like that? What was it like to experience it? I didn't know. But he had handled the situation well, remained composed. For the first time, I felt like I was on the boss's side. It felt odd. Part 23. Things had been shitty for Sean since January. He was always strapped for cash. Things were on the wane with his girlfriend, too. They'd been together for over a year, but were starting to fight a lot. She said he was a bum and not trying hard enough to find a new job. I watched the decline, like a car crash in slow motion. One night, Sean stayed over at the welfare pad. I was getting ready to crash and overheard him on the phone with his girlfriend. She had already dumped him once by this point. He was hunched over the phone on the floor in the living room, whispering pillow talk. It was sad to see my best friend sink so low. She dumped him anyway, this time for good, a night or two later. He woke up the next morning, feeling emotionally wrecked. "Oh, fuck," he said in a weary voice, rubbing his eyes. His shift started in 2 hours. "I can't go in, man. I just can't." So he didn't. He didn't call up the boss and explain the situation either. I could have covered for Sean and met him after work, but that option didn't occur to either of us. Instead, we walked to a nearby forest, smoked a couple of joints, and talked for a long time. Sean was in a bad place in his life, and he knew it. It was going to be a while before he climbed out of the hole. It felt like I was doing the right thing, being with him at his lowest point. That's what friends were for. The next day, everyone at work wanted to know why Sean hadn't shown up for his shift. The boss's wife had to skip class at college and cover for him. Work politics thrives on gossip, and this was the topic of the hour. The boss promptly fired Sean. His wife, who was already working on the floor once in a while, would pick up his 2 shifts. Sean was cut adrift. He would try to find work throughout the summer, but had little luck beyond being a substitute letter carrier for a week or so. Near the end of August, his luck finally seemed to change. There was a music store in the mall looking for a full-timer. Sean applied and impressed the interviewer with his knowledge of bands. He had experience working a cash register and dealing with customers too. The music store wanted a reference from his previous job, so Sean had little choice but to put down the boss as a reference, cross his fingers, and hope for the best. When the manager called the restaurant, the boss told Lori, "I'll take it in my office." I never found out what he said, but Sean got the job, paid back the money for a lost work shirt, and was out of the boss's hair forever. Life went on. Part 24. I don't get it. How does he have a cell phone? I don't even have a cell phone, and I have a job. Mel lit another cigarette. She shook her head. He doesn't have a job. Where does he get the money? A guy she was seeing was available for a booty call whenever and wherever. She liked that. By all accounts, the cell phone was not the largest of his assets, but it was something that she couldn't quite fathom. Cell phones weren't cheap. If you weren't careful, you could rack up a hell of a phone bill. But he had one. How did he pay for it when he was on social assistance? Maybe he sells weed, I suggested. It made sense. If he was on welfare, he had plenty of time for entrepreneurial activity. He could work from home. Pretty good deal. When Sean and I bought weed, we usually met our guy behind a gas station near his home. He was on welfare. So were the 2 other guys in the house. I didn't know how often they had to appear like they were looking for work, but things seemed to be going well for them. Mel contemplated it. Probably. Actually, I think you're right. But why not try and get a real job? I don't get it. Maria, a new girl, came into the staff room with a new topic of conversation. A customer had just told her that if she drank several glasses of ice water a day, It would help her lose weight. The lady at table 12 said that the body has to use more energy to warm up the water in your stomach, so it burns more calories than just drinking regular water. This became a matter of some debate for a week or two that summer. No one went so far as to ask for a doctor's opinion, so eventually it faded from conversation, replaced by a more pressing concern. Did wearing tight shoes result in corns on your feet? Even the boss weighed in on the subject. Mel was sure it was true, but he said it was unscientific. The issue was never resolved. Part 25. I needed to find a new place to live. The welfare pad had become a depressing shithole. I couldn't leave anything not nailed to the floor and be confident it would still be there when I got back. Life with a white trash hip-hop group sounded a lot more interesting than it actually was. One of the servers needed a roommate for a month. She and her boyfriend were planning on moving at the end of the summer, but their roommate was leaving a month early. All I needed to do was pay a month's rent and move in. I said okay. I would need to start looking for a new place immediately, but it would get me out of the welfare pad. I looked in the newspaper for a place between college and the mall. Yes, college. 3 years after finishing high school, I was finally doing it. When you go to class, you feel like you're doing something with your life, Lori told me. You're working towards something. Just what the doctor ordered. A sense of purpose. Class registration came up while I was still at the welfare pad. I woke up early. The weather outside was already hot, and I weaved my way through the detritus of comatose suck members strewn around the living room. There, in the corner, was the phone. I called the registration number. All lines are currently busy. Please hang up and call again. After several attempts, I finally got through. Please enter your student identification number. I did as I was told. I was now in the labyrinth of the automated phone registration system. To add a course, press 1. To drop a course, press 2. To return to the main menu, press 3. Please enter the course code. That course is full. Please enter another course code. You have entered an invalid number. Returning to the main menu. To add a course, press 1. I finally registered for an English Lit course and a class in creative writing. They were the only ones that seemed interesting. Hopefully, going to college would give me an idea of what I wanted to do. I sometimes asked myself how I would get out in the end. Not just out of the restaurant, but restaurant work altogether. Was this it? Maybe not this job, but this station in life? At my first restaurant job, the manager had proudly told me that he had worked in restaurants all his life. Was that to be my fate? I found a place between the college and the mall. A mother and son, recently emigrated from Hong Kong, had bought a house and had an extra room. I asked the son how old he was. He considered the question for a moment and then answered cryptically, 23, 24. I lived with them for 3 months. Public transit in the area was designed to encourage car use. Buses running past my new digs stopped early. The mother and son, determined to live frugally in their new home, did not allow me to use the washer or the clothes dryer. Once a week, I went back to my parents' house and did my laundry. It was a very long walk back to my rented room. Before the end of the semester, I decided to move back to my parents' house. It had been 6 months. Part 26. The condom broke, and that was it. I just blew it inside her, and that's what happened. I totally shouldn't have, and now she's pregnant. Sean's face was flushed. The bartender nodded sympathetically. And then I broke up with her and didn't know about it. And then her mother comes into my work one day, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And she's like looking at me right in the eye and says, "Not very good. Sonia's pregnant." We were at a pub not far from my parents' house. Sean was not the type to keep a secret. With a few drinks in him, he needed to spread the word. It was if he hoped by telling people, by getting the information out, it would no longer be inside him. And if it were no longer inside him, then it wouldn't be true. "So, this was a one-nighter?" the bartender asked. "Oh, I met her through a friend of a friend. I knew this guy that was a DJ in the techno scene downtown, and she was part of that whole crowd. She did a lot of crystal. Totally stupid shit. I should never have even bothered, but my girlfriend had just dumped me and I was lonely, and she was there, so we hooked up at this party." Yeah, that happens. It was just that one time. And now I found out she slept with this guy I know, and this other guy, and this other guy. I was the only one that ever made her wear a condom, and it broke. Sean looked at the bartender and tried to smile. "I'm probably okay, right?" He had pleading in his eyes. "You mean..." "Yeah, like HIV, AIDS. Do you think I could have caught it?" The bartender offered some words of assurance and went to draw another pitcher of beer. I looked around the bar and tried to tune it out. It was all Sean had talked about for weeks. I wanted to be supportive, but I was being dragged into a quagmire of depression and paranoia. The bar offered a sense of continuity, of security, of calm. Years would pass, but the local pub seemed impervious to change. It was an oasis of predictability. The customers didn't change very much. They aged and were sometimes replaced by younger drinkers, but they just looked like updated versions of the previous generation. That winter, it became a nightly pilgrimage. We would meet in the food court after work, leave the mall through the East Mall entrance, trudge our way across the parking lot, and then begin the descent into suburbia proper. The sound of snow crunching under our feet was audible whenever Sean stopped talking about the likelihood that he had been infected with HIV from Sonia. "Dude, it'll be a miracle if I didn't catch anything." "But you don't even know if she has anything." "You don't get it, man. She screwed so many guys downtown and she didn't even ask me to wear a condom." We stopped for a smoke on the footbridge. The trees on both sides of the river were weighed down with snow, and the river glimmered under the stars. In other circumstances, it would have been beautiful, serene. Then it was back to the honeycomb of suburbia. A lot of homes had Christmas decorations up, gaudy strings of light that covered large swaths of the house in red and green. An occasional snowman greeted us from the front lawns. And then we heard it. Someone, possessed of the Christmas spirit, had not only covered their house with Christmas lights and pictures of Santa Claus, but decided the tableau would be incomplete without music. Emanating from somewhere unseen, we could hear an electronic, beeping version of Silent Night, while the green and red lights blinked on and off. We stopped for a minute and looked at the house, saying nothing. The only sound was the song, each note seeming to hang in the cold air. The snow continued to fall. Then one of us said something, and we resumed walking. Christmas 1996 was on its way.